This happened toward the end of 2017/beginning of 2018. I wrote everything down that night so I'd never forget. It was a Thursday. Normal doesn't describe any aspect of my life, so I wouldn't say it was a normal Thursday at work, just like any other. It wasn't. Well, it was in some cases. But we actually had some really important people in the building that day. It was kind of exciting. I work with people with varying disabilities. I'm part of a national organization that promotes the rights for people with disabilities. Since I was 11, I've been hearing stories about the first members and old members who'd done so much to fight for the rights people have now. Those are people I'd grown up really admiring for all their hard work. I'd noticed this guy come into the building probably about 10 or 15 minutes before he started talking to me. The office building was one floor, so it was accessible, and therefore had a very open layout. All the desks and workstations were out in the open, except for a few of the managers' and bosses' offices. I'd recognized the guy after a few minutes, but I wasn't quite sure from where exactly. I was standing and talking to some important members of the community, when he came over and got my attention. At first, I thought he just wanted to get his turn to talk to the people I was in the middle of chatting with, but it soon became very apparent that he wanted to talk to me instead. He said, "Hey, you look really familiar. Have we met before?" Being pretty used to this line of questioning, I responded, "Oh, you know what? I used to spend time here as a kid." "That could be it." "Oh, yeah, must be. My name's Paul, by the way." He started asking me what I remembered about being a kid in such an interesting and colorful environment. To which, I easily answered his questions. Especially once he'd introduced himself. I recognized his name immediately from stories told by old friends and coworkers, but I couldn't remember if he was someone I should be associating with or not. Sometimes, my coworkers, who mostly really looked out for me, would warn me to stay away from certain people, but I really couldn't recall if he was one of those people or not. After about 20 minutes of chatting, I went back to work at my desk, in one of the most secluded corners of the office. Originally, I'd really liked that aspect about it. Pretty soon, though, I would come to really resent its position. Anyway, I'd gotten back to work, entering data into our database, and other various tasks I had to get done before the end of the day. I was so focused, I didn't really notice that everyone had started leaving and the office had emptied out a lot sooner than normal. It wasn't actually unusual for that to happen around 2:30 on a Thursday afternoon, but I'd really gotten used to having close friends around that always had my back. At this point, some of the people I was closest to had left the organization, and I'd started to feel, well, less safe than I had previously. So, there I was, minding my own business, when all of a sudden, Paul was leaning against the wall next to my desk, just staring at me. "Hey, I really enjoyed our conversation earlier. Do you remember?" He started asking me if I remembered some mutual acquaintances, which I did. I really should have tried to get up and go into the back, where I could be around one of my coworkers, who'd been like another mom to me, growing up. However, Paul had seemed kinda harmless at that point. Everything was fine at first, until it took a dark turn. Paul said, "You know, when I first saw you, I was captured by your beauty." "Oh, thanks." I was feeling pretty awkward at that point, but I didn't want to be rude. "Truthfully, I only sorta recognized you. But wow, you've really grown into such a gorgeous young lady." He sat down in one of the chairs by my desk, where clients usually sat. He scooted it closer to me, and I scooted as close as I could to the wall, trying to put some distance between us as I looked around. There was nobody else in the immediate vicinity. Which most likely meant, everyone else was either in a meeting or had gone home. Except for our receptionist, who was blind. Since the alarm bells were going off in my head, I said, "Hey, Paul, I'm gonna need to get back to work soon." I wanted to be polite, because he really hadn't done anything wrong. I just got this super strange vibe from him all of a sudden. "Okay, sure, I understand. But just let me ask you this one thing." So, he started asking me work-related questions about affordable housing, which is something I tend to have some knowledge about. He got himself comfortable while we started having a more productive conversation, before he completely derailed it. "You know, I just moved back from Kansas recently." He'd already said it 2 or 3 times during our conversation. "Yeah, I think you mentioned that. I think I'm gonna go back soon." He lightly set his hand on my knee while he talked, and I scooted it away so his hand fell off. "Please don't touch me." I try to be polite, but I absolutely hate being touched by people I don't know. "Oh, I'm sorry. It's just. You remind me so much of my daughter. I used to be so close with her. But we don't talk much anymore. It's her mother's fault." "I'm sorry to hear that," I told him flatly. At this point, I just really wanted him to leave me alone. "You have no idea, it's been such a hard few months." He put his hand on my knee again, and that time, I pushed him away. "Please don't touch me. I don't like that." "Oh, I know. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting." Then he reached up to touch my hair. I have really long hair, and even though I hate it almost more than anything else, people tend to touch it without asking. So, it's not that uncommon. "Your hair is just so stunning." "Paul, please don't touch me. I've asked you a few times already." Now, normally, any one of my guy coworkers would have come over and saved me. It's what always happened. I could just look over at one of them from across the room, and they'd immediately start yelling at the offending person to leave me alone, or they'd be kicked out. I had 3 masculine coworkers who'd been known to do that for me without question. Except this one instance, 'cause none of them were there that day, and only one was still working with me, at the time. I started to stand up, trying to skirt around Paul and find one of my other coworkers, or anyone really that could have had my back, or just been a witness to the things this creep was saying. Unfortunately, Paul stood up too. He wouldn't let me move around him. He had me trapped in my once safe little corner, conveniently out of the way of any cameras, or anyone who could have seen what he was doing. "Where are you going?" he practically demanded. "Oh, I just have to pee." I straight up lied through my teeth, planning on hiding in the bathroom for the rest of the day. Honestly, I never got the chance, though. No. Our conversation was just getting good. "You can't leave right now." "But I really have to." Paul reached out and started touching my hair again. He had me backed up into the corner, and he was a lot taller than me, so I couldn't get around his lanky arms. "I really want to take you back to Kansas with me." "No." I was really starting to get kinda scared. He'd completely stopped trying to hide his creepiness. "But we could have such a good time together. I'm not that much older than you." Actually, he was already well into his 50s, and I was 24. "I have a boyfriend. And I'd never leave this state. I'm sure your bosses wouldn't mind. We could build a good life together." No. I couldn't come up with a reason to try to get around him fast enough, so I just ducked under his arm and sat down behind the computer. I woke it up and pretended to get back to something I was working on. But really, I sent an SOS message through Google Chat to my manager, Amy, asking for her help. I wasn't even sure if she was at her desk. But I sent it anyway and closed out of the chat box, while he was trying to look over my shoulder. I was nervous about keeping my back to him, but I really needed to send the message. Once I was facing away from him, he started playing with my hair again and touching my shoulders. Leaning in close, he started whispering in my ear. "If you don't come with me willingly, I might just have to kidnap you and take you there. When you're alone and least expect it, that's when it'll happen." To be fair, he could have been joking. I'm really not sure, but I wasn't about to treat it like a joke. Plus, he'd sounded pretty damn serious to me. It was at that moment that my manager just happened to walk by. Unbeknownst to me, she hadn't seen the message I'd sent her, having just gotten out of a meeting. But she must have noticed the panicked look on my face, or maybe she was completely oblivious to it all, and actually did need my help. "Hey, OP, I need your help with something in my office." I immediately grabbed my phone and bolted around Paul and made a beeline toward my manager, even going so far as to speed walk in front of her, so she was between me and him. When we made it to her office, I thought for sure she'd close the door, and I could tell her what happened. But instead, Paul followed us. And she let him. My heart was still pounding, and I was really trying to hold my shit together, but Amy let Paul into her office, while I was doing some random filing, and he continued exactly what he was doing when we were alone. He came up behind me and started playing with my hair, while talking to Amy. I moved away from him, to the other side of her office, but he kept trying to get close to me. Disappointingly, Amy did nothing to keep his grubby hands from touching my shoulders and my hair, despite me telling him several times, in front of her, to please stop. He even asked her if she would mind if I took a little vacation for a while. To which, she answered that no, she didn't mind at all. I'm not sure if she was tired or busy or had other things on her mind, but it didn't seem like she noticed how uncomfortable Paul was making me feel. Even after I moved behind her, so she and her desk were between me and him, while I continued filing things. All of a sudden, Amy made an announcement that struck fear into my heart. "Paul, I have to get going now, so you're gonna have to leave my office and go find someone else to chat with, okay?" I stared at her like she'd grown a third head. Everyone else in the building except the department heads had gone home for the day, and they were all in meetings. Was she seriously going to leave me and Paul alone? I was still scheduled for another hour and a half. It took a few minutes, but Amy finally got Paul to leave her office, while I hung around as she gathered her things. "Are you really leaving?" I can't be alone with that guy." "Yeah. I sorta saw. He was being weird, right?" So, she did see it too. I wanted to ask her why she didn't stop it, but she was in a big rush to leave. "If you're leaving, can I please go home too?" I swear, my eyes probably filled with tears, 'cause I was seriously about to start crying. Mostly, I was just nervous as hell. My manager seemed to notice for the first time, and nodded her head. "Yes. Go ahead. Can you stay until I pack my stuff, and leave with me?" Amy huffed a little, looking exasperated by the simple conversation we were having. "Honestly, I really have to get going. I have an appointment I can't be late to." "Okay. See ya tomorrow, then." I didn't push the issue. Instead, I followed her out of her office and hurried to grab all my crap. I don't even think I properly shut down my computer, I was in such a hurry. But I didn't actually see Paul again until right as I was rushing out the building gates. Paranoid, I looked around and there he was, about 20 yards back and undoubtedly following me. I knew for sure, after I'd made a couple turns, and he didn't keep going straight. Seeing a crosswalk sign slowly counting down to the end, I bolted across the street, and Paul got caught at the traffic light. On the other side, breathing heavily, I called my mom, so I could tell her what happened. I was hoping she would calm me down. But instead, she told me it was my fault and I should have told him off right away. She said if I was more assertive, creeps like that wouldn't bother me as much as they had in the past. She spent the next 20 minutes, berating me about how I needed to be better about standing up for myself, even against men twice my size. Part of me really believed that was true. Part of me still does. The next day, I told one of my coworkers, Nora, who'd been around a long time what happened, and she flipped out on Paul when she saw him next. She threatened his life a few times, which I wouldn't put it past her to take, honestly. She's a terrifying woman, and demanded that he apologize to me. I would have been happy to never see the guy again. But as per her wishes, a few weeks later, he came up to apologize to me while she was standing a few yards away. He said he was sorry all sweetly, but as soon as Nora was distracted, he bent down and whispered a promise into my ear. "I'm still coming for you." I jumped away from him and bolted into the bathroom and locked myself inside until I was sure he was gone. I told Nora later and she said she'd take care of it. I'm still not sure what she did, but I never saw or heard from him again. The day after that very first incident, I told 2 other managers, including the one who'd done next to nothing to help me out, the operations guy, and the HR girl what had happened, but they all seemed mostly uninterested. So, the incident just became another weird story that I'd sometimes tell if the topic ever arose of creepy clients. I never really shied away from talking about it, or hiding it from anyone. It was just a thing that happened. I moved on. Except that a few months later, almost 4 or 5, the HR girl, Callie, asked me to go on a private walk with her around the neighborhood where our building was located, so we could talk about something important. She kept saying it wasn't anything bad, and that I wasn't in trouble. But when we were far enough from potentially prying ears, she asked me about what happened with Paul. I told her every little detail. She apologized profusely that no one did anything at the time. She acknowledged that I'd been ignored by the management staff, and that no one had really stepped up to protect me from such a traumatizing situation, her words. Then, she asked if I wanted to press charges. I told her I didn't see the point, as it had seriously been months since it happened, and he'd only come back once or twice since. Actually, I'd never seen him again after the day he tried to apologize to me. But even so, it became a big deal. All of a sudden, the director of our entire organization dragged me into her office and offered me trauma counseling and asked me to identify a picture of the guy, so everyone could be on the lookout. Apparently, after 4 months of silence, they were intent on making sure I felt safe again. All the bosses kept saying we should speak up immediately if we ever felt threatened, whenever we had a meeting in the several weeks that followed. They asked me if I would mind if they announced to everyone on staff that Paul was banned from our organization, and if I would mind their alluding to the reason. I said I didn't care. 'Cause I didn't, really. Mostly, I just thought it was interesting that no one cared until months after it would have done any good. It always kinda seemed like it got brought up in an executive meeting, and someone must have mentioned something about the potential for a lawsuit, and they were just trying to cover their asses. Which seemed fine, as long as they started looking after other employees, to keep everyone safe. Only, that didn't happen. Thanks for watching. The link to the original Reddit post is in the description below. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.